It's been a wild week in baseball, and we here at Almost Cooperstown looking to do something a little different. And we're going to talk about what's been going on in baseball this week because it's been a really exciting one.
When I was a kid, there was an announcer named Mel Allen that was late in his career. He was a Yankee announcer, I think, a famous announcer, and he hosted a show on Saturday afternoon. It'd be like at 2:00 this week in baseball. And you think about an appointment TV thing on a Saturday afternoon at 2:00.
Well, I imagine when you were a kid, that was a lot bigger deal because that was probably one of your few chances to kind of see highlights and important things from a bunch of players,
before ESPN,
before the internet.
So basically, you get a chance to see the players in some games, and it's a show I watched, and a lot of people watched.
And I mean, because there's always something interesting to talk about. Obviously, the story of this week has to be Julio Rodriguez and his unbelievable performance.
So it was 17. I saw for 22 over a 4-game stretch,
which is a record for the most hits in a 4-game span.
I didn't realize that. So that's an all-time major league record, and those are 4-game stretches, really quite something. And he's really coming on, as are the Mariners.
I think they played at like a 22-5 rate since they've been playing really good baseball for a while.
And I think the Blue Jays here on Sunday, this is dropping on Monday, and we will drop our episodes. This is going to be a regular thing we're doing. We're going to drop this 20-minute sort of recap of baseball week. And the Blue Jays pounded the Reds today in the last game of the series. So they're, I think, effectively tied with the Mariners right now in the loss column, or one game different in the loss column.
Yeah, it's been two teams moving in different directions because you've had the Mariners on the upswing while you've had the Blue Jays kind of coming back. They've been like 4-6 in their last 10 before today's game.
Yeah, I'm still bullish on the Blue Jays. Their chances. It's good to see Bichette back in the lineup. Did you see today that they DFA'd Paul DeYoung?
Yeah.
So they bring him in. They trade for him when he gets hurt. The moment he comes back, he was 3 for 44.
Yeah, that's rough.
3 for 44.
That's like that was like.
I think Howie Rose said that's like a bad pitcher hitting.
Yeah. And it certainly hasn't helped them that Vlad Guerrero Jr. has not been the monster this season that he was last season.
No. I mean, that was an MVP caliber type season, and the past two actually for him. But the Blue Jays, I still have faith in them. I'd have more faith if Alek Manoah could find it.
Right. I think the thing that you have to
he
ask,
hasn't.
I think it's interesting looking because, if we can start there, do you think the Blue Jays or the Reds have it in them to make that run? Which one of those two teams do you think kind of has the better chance of making it to the postseason?
I think if I were to look at the playoffs and you look at the AL, besides the Orioles, and I wonder about the Orioles or the Rays, one of those teams not making it. I think the Blue Jays will make it from the American League East.
I think that's a pretty good point. I think it's interesting with the Orioles. They've been playing unbelievably well this whole season, but there's some concerning advanced stats about that team. Not all of them. Some of them are unbelievable. And I think the fact that their expected win rate is about 8 wins less than they have right now because their run differential is they remind me a lot of that 107 Giant win team where it just seemed like in every 1-run game that year until the postseason, it just went the Giants' way. And it didn't mean that they were a bad team.
Right, and it's not that I'm picking against the Orioles, but the Rays also, with obviously the Shane McClanahan injury, which is a giant injury pitching-wise, Cy Young candidate, and the Wander Franco situation, they're going to have to really be resilient here the last 6 weeks of the season.
And for a team that's been so lauded for their ability to get it done without a superstar, losing both your superstar shortstop potentially and for sure your superstar pitcher, that's going to make it really hard to compete going down the stretch because you have to play great.
So you mentioned the Mariners. So then really it's between the Mariners and one of those 3 teams in the AL East, because it looks like the Twins are going to bumble to the AL Central title because the Guardians are just playing terribly.
I mean, if you wanted to have a player that's had a disappointing season this year, and I hate doing this to him because he's such a young guy, but Andres Jimenez has had a nightmarish year compared to his year last year.
After we Met fans were looking at it going, well, Lindor's been great. We love Lindor, and we really do. But they had Rosario and they got Jimenez. And they traded Rosario bizarrely for Noah Syndergaard,
which worked out unbelievably.
Well, for the Dodgers,
15-2 since the trade.
Not for the Guardians. So I think it'll be between those teams. I don't see anybody else in the American League, getting there.
There's certainly not going to be you're not expecting an AL Central team to charge up. No. So the question is do the Rangers hang around in that competition for that third wild card spot.
I could see them having a tough time, but I think that they will be the team that makes it, and either the Astros or the Mariners might have a problem.
If you're the Astros, you have to be concerned that Christian Javier, who was so good last year, has struggled this year. Framber Valdez, over his last 10 starts, has not looked like
really, because that stretch we watched him early in the season, he was tremendous, and he threw the no-hitter.
He's been really rough. He got in a fight yesterday in the Mariner game because Julio hit the home run off him,
right,
and then he hit the next guy, and a brawl broke out.
Yeah, well, that shows frustration.
Right.
It's hard to doubt the Astros because of their pedigree and their consistency.
And Verlander.
You know, right. But I just feel like they're in a little bit. You're right. They're in a little bit of a scuffle right now.
Right. There's a lot of teams that have been on top for a long time this year that are now all kind of scuffling. You have the Astros that are doing it. You have the Rays that have been threatening to do that. And I think another team that you have to kind of worry about is the D-backs.
Right, so we're switching leads, but before let's just finish talking about the Yankees, and the fact that since we recorded, I guess a little over a week ago, I don't think they've won a game.
No, they've lost a lot.
7 in a row or something like that.
Into a complete
and you know, look, we Met fans saw that happen at the trade deadline for the Mets because they went in and got their doors blown off in Atlanta after they had lost a few before that. And the mojo's gone, the season's gone, everything's gone.
I think that Atlanta series was just a victim of a lot of poor timing too for the Mets. Like playing that series right after they traded everybody had to make things 1,000 times worse for them. So, but I think if you're the Yankees, I mean, concerning things from this week, Julio Rodriguez out-hit them in a 4-game series.
yeah, I'm going to do that kind of stuff. And we talked about this a few times off air. You know, Stanton, I didn't realize that he was batting 199 for the Yankees. And you know, Judge can carry a team, but not when he's got nobody else hitting at all. And that's kind of what happened there. And, you know, I chalk it up like I do with the Mets to a certain degree of a bad season. I think there's a little too much hope that Nestor Cortez was all of a sudden an upper-level pitcher.
Right, yeah. I think that was a little bit unrealistic to believe that Nestor Cortez was suddenly like, oh no, this guy's like a top 10 arm in the American League, and I don't think you couldn't reasonably expect that.
And when Garrett Cole goes out and has a bad outing like he did this weekend,
them.
right? We got to win every game that guy pitches because we don't really have other guys we can, and they still have a really good bullpen.
I just have to think when you look at a lot of these teams that are struggling this year, it's a lot of the teams that had high-paying veterans. I got to think the pace of play change definitely affected teams with older players more than it affected teams with younger players.
Yeah, and I think another team that has managed to be much better than I give them credit for the entire season of the Red Sox.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're 7 games over 500.
I
don't know how they're doing it.
We thought they were going to be a bottom.
I don't know how they're doing it
without Rafael Devers having an unbelievable season. He's on track for about.
Tristan Casas looks like a player.
Yeah, Devers, I think it's on pace for like 3.5 more, which is a big drop from his normal.
So credit to them. It's for them. It's unfortunate that they're in a division where it doesn't matter. It's going to be the difference between 4th or 5th.
Well, I think for the Red Sox fans, you were looking at, well, it was going to be cool to be part of a division in which every team finished with a winning record and a positive run differential. It's probably even more fun if every team but the Yankees.
From the Red Sox perspective.
They're loving that.
And do you think there's any Red Sox fans looking at Xander Bogaerts going,
that worked out.
Yeah, they paid him a lot of money and we didn't, and it's so far looking good for us.
I think it's interesting because, you look at a team like the Mets and the Yankees, 2 of the higher payrolls in baseball. 2 of the highest, actually. I think they're.
The Mets by far the highest.
Mets are 1. I think Padres.
Which
are
I
2,
still can't believe as a Net fan that we say stuff
3.
like that.
Well, I don't know if they are anymore with all the trades they've made.
Okay, still for this year.
I think it's interesting that both the Mets and the Yankees, you can point to like clear areas on their team that are underperforming, and then you just look at the Padres and you're like, why are you bad?
Yeah. It's like they have all the pieces in place, and I think
nobody's really having a particularly bad season by any stretch.
Yeah, I looked at Juan Soto. They still got Bogaerts is having for Bogaerts,
but
not a Bogaerts season.
To believe that you're going to tell me, oh yeah, Xander Bogaerts is the reason this is a below 500 team.
And I was listening to the leadoff spot on Friday, and Eduardo Perez and Steve Phillips were talking about it, and they got to the Padres, and Eduardo believes in the Padres. I'm picking the Padres, and Steve's like, they're terrible. Like, they haven't done anything all year long.
To be picking the Padres is basically being like, yeah, they're just going to go like 30-2 the rest of the way.
Right. Like, what makes you think all of a sudden they're going to turn it around and play what we expected them to play, like 700 ball the rest of the way? What?
Us expecting the Mets to make the wild card.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a pipe dream. So I think, you mentioned the Diamondbacks then, and I don't see it. I don't see them getting to the finish line.
No, Corbin Carroll has come a little bit back down to earth after. I mean, it was kind of expected considering how good he was playing to start.
They're
this
kind of
season.
back to being the little team that could.
Right.
We this might not be our year. And I think no matter what, the Diamondbacks have had a really good year for that franchise
if you're
direction.
the Diamondbacks, you're very happy with your direction for the future. You're a young team. You haven't invested a lot of money in long contracts. You have the ability to go make moves. Probably the most frustrating thing to you is that the Dodgers apparently figured it out and turned into a great team again.
Well, they got Ahmed Rosario.
Yeah, that was
the answer.
Or is it they got rid of Thor?
And they got rid of Thor. And the D-backs, still only have the one pitcher who still probably is, I'd say, the favorite for the Cy Young, would you say? Zach Gallen?
I think so in the NL. But the problem for the Diamondbacks is even if you make the wild card game, he can only pitch one of those
Right.
games.
We saw that last year with the Mets. That's exactly right. You don't. So if you're going to get there, do you really want to go into that and get your doors blown off by somebody?
Right. You win game 1 behind Zach Gallen and then get blown out in games 2 and 3.
So the Giants are the other little team that could, which you look scratching your head going, I don't know how they do that.
Right, and I think it's interesting because with not having a division like the AL East in the NL, the wild card race is a little bit more interesting because you've got a team like the Giants, you've got teams like the Marlins and the Cubs that are all kind of floating around, and the Reds that are all like, hey, we might be a postseason team.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about the Braves in a second. They're obviously the clear division winner, and the Dodgers have iced that division as well.
And it looks like the Brewers is unlikely.
It looks like the Brewers, but I don't know. I don't trust that team.
A team with that anemic of an offense.
I love their pitching, but I still don't trust that team to score enough runs. And I kind of have felt like the Phillies are the wild card team that will be there.
Right.
Like out of all the other ones, they're going to make it. And so now it's between the Cubs and the Reds and the Marlins and the Diamondbacks and the Giants.
For those last 2 spots.
You got 2 spots out of that. And
should be a fun race going down the stretch.
We already talked about it, right? I think it's going to be good. I don't know what I'm wishing for, actually.
I want the Reds. I would love the Reds and the Diamondbacks to make it just because it would be fun. I don't want the Marlins to make it because they're in the NL East.
I'd like to see Joey Votto in the playoffs.
Exactly.
I think that kind of a thing would be really fun.
Right.
And I think the Diamondbacks, just because it's been so long.
And if you ended up with some kind of wacky series like the Diamondbacks versus like the Reds or something, cool. Some team we never get to see in the postseason is advancing to the second round.
Oh, and the Marlins made it in the pandemic season somehow 2020. So I don't think the Marlins are. I don't trust them as much as I trust the other teams to get to the finish line.
Right, especially with them shutting down some of their better players earlier this season.
Yeah. But it was a great week in baseball, and we just love watching pennant races.
And just if tonight I'm really excited. They're playing the Williamsport game. I think it's such a good idea, and I really hope they expand it and keep doing it.
Yeah, the Phillies and the Nationals, so obviously as local a connection it can be, and they just announced today that the Yankees are going to play the Tigers in that game next year.
And we get the Field of Dreams game, too.
And we get the Field of Dreams game. So, but Bryce Harper was saying he'd like to play a game up. I didn't realize that he grew up in Cooperstown or near Cooperstown, and he wants to play a game. Why don't we have a game there? And it's interesting that the players will want to make the Field of Dreams game trip. We didn't have that this year, but they'll start again next year. And, you think it's a big travel thing to go to this sort of faraway place and get there. But the players want to make the effort to do that, and I like that a lot.
It'd be really cool to have a game the day after the Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
I think they should do it. You're right.